This is why you should roll your eyes anytime somebody tries to tell you that we should make an Asian NATO. And if you're curious about this, you can go read more in my Substack, which is linked in my bio. Now, first of all, NATO is an incredibly important and strategic defensive alliance that the United States probably couldn't have won the Cold War without, and we should not leave. NATO is incredibly important in countering Russian aggression and expansionism, and it allows us to get a peek inside of all of the other most advanced militaries in the world. So NATO's important. I'm not saying that it's not. However, we should not attempt at this stage to replicate NATO's success in the Indo-Pacific. And that is because we are in the window for a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. That is our greatest national security priority right now. And the best way for the United States to counter that threat of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is not to create new multilateral agreements. It is to double, triple, quadruple down on existing bilateral arrangements and engaging in a massive defense buildup. Now, I've made videos about why keeping the status quo in Taiwan is so important, so you can scroll through my page if you're curious about that. But the first reason I think it's really dumb to talk about an Asian NATO is because Taiwan in its current autonomous form could not be a part of an Asian NATO. And that's because the United States and all of our diplomatic partners recognize the one China policy. It would be seen as diplomatically too provocative to include Taiwan in Asian NATO. But that will likely be the first battle with China. So it would be a waste of time and energy to mint a brand new multilateral defensive agreement when it wouldn't even be able to acknowledge the first struggle that we would have with China. And if Taiwan were to fall, all of our partners in the Pacific would just go cut deals with China so that they would not get invaded too. So it would render the, so-called Asian NATO useless. But we are already party to many bilateral agreements in the Indo-Pacific. I mean, we have defensive agreements with the Philippines, Thailand, Australia, South Korea, and Japan. And we sell weapons to Taiwan. We also deal with ASEAN, and we are a part of the Quad, which is us, Japan, Australia, and India. And there are multilateral and bilateral defensive agreements between South Korea, Japan, and Australia that don't include us. There's tons of these agreements in the Indo-Pacific. The presence of them does not deter China. The presence of a new one wouldn't deter them either. But maybe worst of all, the presence of an Asian NATO could lull us into a false sense of security. With the Iran nuclear deal, for instance, I mean, there are still liberals and neoliberals who will run around saying, oh my God, we were so safe because of the Iran deal. The Middle East got demonstrably less safe after we signed the Iran deal. Iran was able to pursue an internationally legitimate nuclear program after we signed the Iran deal, and they had way more money that they could funnel to their proxies like Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and the Shia militias in Iraq and Syria. Those militias would have never become so powerful had we not given them the money from the Iran deal. Safe. The only thing that made the Middle East more safe was using hard power to defeat those militias, which Israel did for us over the last year. But even with NATO, again, I agree that NATO is important and we should not leave it. But once we defeated the Soviet Union, a lot of our NATO partners stopped contributing the mandatory 2% towards their defensive budgets. I mean, they love to hold a summit and talk about how important the NATO alliance is to our collective security and our shared values. But at the end of the day, how important is it really if you can't pay for it? Ultimately, a lot of these multilateral deals are just excuses for politicians and the defense establishment and journalists to attend a bunch of summits. And again, summits don't promote security. They don't prevent war. We don't need an excuse for our defense establishment to travel to Asia a couple more times a year. We need hard power buildup. That is what the United States and our partners in the Pacific should focus on right now, and we don't need Asian NATO to do it.